Well, Minnesota's in the rearview mirror. I, of course, took my calls and comments and so forth, which is just a portion of what you guys hear on a daily basis. And there was certainly opportunity for the good and for the bad, for the optimist and for the pessimist, because the pessimist will point to giving up 31 points, even when it appeared as though Tanner Morgan wasn't necessarily on his game from start to finish. The pessimist will point to CJ Stroud looking pretty bad after maybe his first 4 or 5 throws through the rest of the first half. The pessimist will say, even when he got it together, it's because he has elite playmakers and he just had to toss him the football. The optimist will say a number of things, and to not delay the analysis, I will just speak to one, that when you recruit 5-star athletes, they're the guys that can change a game like that, both offensively and defensively. Steve, your thoughts about the effort against the Gophers?
Well, I think it went like a lot of us thought. I think most people who studied Minnesota understood it was a veteran team with a huge offensive line, a pretty good defensive line, and playing at home at night. And then you add in the added fact that it sprinkled in the first half and then kind of drizzled in the second half. It was not an easy game for Ohio State. There were 4 lead changes in the game. In fact, it went back and forth. And Ohio State finally grabbed control late in the third quarter on a defensive touchdown to finally go ahead, I think 31-20 at that point. And you thought, well, it looks pretty good for Ohio State at this point. But obviously Minnesota kept coming, and Ohio State really didn't put them away till about 4 minutes to go in the game, when they got another defensive turnover with a 14-point lead and were able to ride it out from there. So it went, maybe they gave up a few more points in yards than people thought. They gave up over 400 yards offense, 200 yards rushing, 31 points, tied for the most points Ohio State's allowed in a season opener in the modern era of Ohio State football, along with 31 points in the 77-31 win over Oregon State in 2018. And so I think that there are some warning signals on the defensive side of the football, which we can get into. Some reasons for it. Obviously, you had 7 or 8 guys making their first career start in that game, and so on and so forth. So a lot of new and different things happening on the defensive side of the football. Offense, they kind of picked up right where they left off. Well, I would say that the first half was kind of dreary and dull. They only scored 10 points in the first half, and then 35 in the second. So, 28 on offense and 7 on defense. So, offense looks, if they play like they did in the second half, they're going to be a hard team to beat. But that was my nickel version of what I saw. Kind of about what you'd think. This wasn't Northern Illinois or Ball State that they were playing. This was Minnesota, 2 years removed from an 11-2 team with a veteran quarterback and a good running back, although he was left the game with an injury. And really the result was a lot of what I think all of us talked about last week, that Minnesota was going to give them a tough game, at least for 2.5, 3 quarters, and that's how it played out.
Yeah, I agree with what Steve said there. Just, the odds makers coming into the season saying Ohio State was going to be a double-digit favorite in every game, 13, 14 points in most of the major games. It's really easy to kind of take your eye as a fan off the prize and say, well, everything's going to just be a walkover. They're just going to take care of what they need to take care of, and it's just going to be a pick-your-score type of situation. These other teams have helmets and shoulder pads and football facilities and scholarships and all that good stuff too. So you have to come out there and be able to compete in less than ideal circumstances at certain points, a little bit wet. At least it wasn't the 15-degree game where JT Barrett's still running that touchdown for 80 yards. Granted, we sat there and we watched Mayan Williams. His took a minute to develop as well, but not quite to, it wasn't Barrett-esque. But somebody coming out and having, their first game the way that CJ Stroud did, I think that there's a lot of room for improvement from week 1 to week 2. Minnesota certainly took a bad break, losing Mo Abraham for the season. I mean, he was, well on his way to 200 yards in the game. Ohio State certainly had issues getting guys down to the ground, but I think that's just going to be part of the modern game as you're seeing teams moving away more and more from full practice of tackling in the offseason due to injuries and so on and so forth. So you're really getting most of your early action to start the season. So, there's some good, there's some bad. Is it a game that fans are going to go back and watch 10 times this year? Probably not. But, it's a good start. Ohio State's 1-0 in conference play and, really has an opportunity to kind of put an exclamation point on the early season with this Oregon game, because then they can really decelerate with Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, and Maryland.
I think maybe the best thing that came out of this is that Ohio State responded to being down at halftime. They've had some adversity now. They overcame it in resounding fashion. So that's always a plus. The coaches always want to know. They never really know about their team until they're in that position. They think they have a good idea, but until they see it happen. So now they've seen that happen, and the players have experienced it. They've gone into halftime down. So if it happens again, this won't be anything new, and they can rely on past experiences and past successes. In terms of CJ Stroud just throwing it and letting players make plays, I mean, let's remember each of those 4 touchdown passes were precise. And, even the screen pass to Travion Henderson was right over top of the defender, right where it needed to be. The touchdown throw to Garrett Wilson, there was nobody in the vicinity, but Wilson never had to slow down. The first touchdown to Olave was just over top of the defender, like they teach, and was a perfect throw almost off of his back foot. And then the last touchdown to Olave was on the move, rolling out, and it was a perfect strike. So, yeah, they made plays after the catch, but he put the ball where it needed to be. And you can excuse a bunch of guys for having a rough first half of a first start, but now that's passed. I mean, now it's old news. They're all veterans now. We'll see.
So, Tony, you make a good point there. We'll stay with you because Steve mentions the defense, and that's the bigger concern, but we'll start at quarterback because that's what everybody wants to hear. I try to have a balanced approach on this. It's a major game, a major opponent. It's a first start, and it's a first pass attempt ever. So Ryan Day certainly dialed up conservative play calls early in the game, gave him some easy tosses to the outside to Garrett Wilson in particular, and then they started to amp it up from there. But he went through a stretch that was fairly rough there in the first half. But I think you hit on a good point in regards to we tend to think of the deeper throws as being the more difficult throws for obvious reasons, but that's not necessarily always the case. And he did some good things out there. What would be the next steps for you, or anything else to add on the quarterback analysis? Then we'll hit it up with Steve and Kevin.
One of the things that I liked what Ryan Day said is, they were aggressive in the second half, and he said that's a decision that is made during the week. You make that decision during the week to be aggressive, because in the game, you don't want to be as aggressive as you've planned to be, but you have to follow through with that plan. You have to follow through with what you've worked for, what you've practiced for, what you prepared your team for. And if you don't, you don't want to be making those decisions in the while you're emotional or right in the mix, right in the fray of all of it. You've prepared for it. You go ahead and just do it. And so you give the quarterbacks confidence in that way. The starting quarterback won the job for a reason. So use those plays that you have been practicing and rely on these guys. I mean, they're all at Ohio State for a reason. You want to be aggressive. That's what they've been taught. That's what Ryan Day wants to be. He wants to be aggressive on offense and defense. And we remember at times Urban Meyer would start to bog down. And you know what? The best course of action here is just to run JT Barrett for a while, and we'll just go ahead and do that. And that's not what Ryan Day wants to do. He wants to go ahead and make plays and get big chunks of yards, and he saw it.
I'll jump in. I think that this was a great learning experience for a young quarterback. As I think you guys said, overcoming adversity, the rain, the opponent, the fans, night game, Minnesota's defense, everything else that was involved there. was really stacked up against him. He threw a first half interception, and he said that, first of all, he didn't think that his head was really where it needed to be. He wasn't really tuned in. And, you can't make yourself feel something that you can't feel. And it's hard to force that feeling that you're locked in. I mean, you've envisioned this moment for your entire life as a football player, that you are now the starting quarterback at a major college university in a big game on network television, coast to coast, and you go out there and for whatever reason, you just don't have it. It just isn't there. The situation is not playing out the way you thought and you dreamed and you envisioned that it was going to be. It's harder than you thought it was. And he said his teammates and his coaches stayed positive, stayed in his face, kept him in the moment, and eventually he got the feeling, and it came around for him, and he channeled it in the second half. He was outstanding, 5 of 8 passing, 236 yards, and 4 of the 5 completions went for touchdowns, and just nothing short of remarkable to watch the way that he rebounded in that second half and made plays. I mean, you take your pick on which one you like the best. I mean, Minnesota would score a touchdown to grab the lead, and Ohio State had it back within a minute of clock time. I mean, it was just I think they scored 3 touchdowns in a span of 6 offensive plays in there at one stretch, and also had the defensive touchdown in there too in the second half. So you really look at it, you got to give him and his teammates and his coaches credit for staying with the plan. It would have been easy to abandon the plan. You're down 14-10 at halftime. You take the lead, then you fall behind again. It would have been easy to abandon the plan, but they did not do that. They stayed with it. They kept attacking, and eventually they hit those big plays. I think what you would hate to see is a team that is comfortable falling behind by 7 or 10 points against a quality opponent, knowing, oh, we've got these touchdown bombs that are always going to be the trump card that we just lay on the table at any moment, because a good opponent can take away those deep passes sometimes and not allow you to make those big plays. I don't know that Penn State, with that great defense that we saw, Iowa, if they ever get to play them maybe in the championship game, are going to allow those kind of explosive plays, and you're going to need to be consistent on offense. But it is quite a security blanket in that you've got Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. And, now let's get back to seeing more out of Jackson Smith-Njigba, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, Jeremy Ruckert, Cade Stover, and the rest. Let's get them all involved going forward.
Yeah, I think you guys touched upon a lot of it. Ohio State only had 3 guys run the ball, had 6 guys catch the ball. I mean, it was very short rotations in terms of who actually got their hands on the ball during the game. Talking about drive length, they only had 1 drive that was longer than 7 plays. That was a 14-play drive that resulted in 3 points. They had a 7-play drive, and then everything else were in the 2, 3, 5-play range. And yeah, I mean, we can sit there and talk about 45-31, whatever, but how many teams out there would have killed to have a 45-31 win? The expectations at Ohio State are always going to be high, and that's the way Ohio State likes it, because you can't have those expectations if you don't win a lot of games, and Ohio State's won a lot of games, and on to the next one.